Good morning. My name is Kat Miller, and we'd like to welcome you to Open Circle. It's wonderful to have you all here this morning. Please turn off your cell phones. You may think your cell phone's off if you would just give it a little check. And if you're really stubborn, don't check at all. It's fine. Your neighbors will let you know later if they pop on. Today's Open Circle mission statement is going to be read by Roseanne Balbontin. Oh, I did it so good a minute ago.
Good morning. Open Circle provides a supportive environment to gather for social interaction and to improve our understanding of ourselves, our community, and our world. Presentations span a wide range of intellectual, cultural, physical, and spiritual topics. We do not necessarily agree with the ideas and philosophies of our presenters. We encourage you to listen with an open mind and to form your own opinions.
Thank you. We're always looking for presenters for Open Circle. We're a bit out in the future, but you're welcome to talk to Margaret Van Every, who I saw right there in the pink shirt with the beautiful new hairstyle. She will talk to you about what it is it takes to become a presenter. You can also go onto our fabulous website, opencircleajijic.org, and you can see how to do it there. While you're there, if you haven't signed up on our email sign-up list, you can do so there, or you can do so under the tree. I sound a little like Dr. Seuss. Okay. If you're here for the first time, we'd love to welcome you. So if you'd please stand up, we'd love to acknowledge you. Hello. Very nice to have you here. And let me backtrack for just a second. While you're on opencircleajijic.org, you're welcome to look up our videos. We have years and years of videos that Brad Gorman and Open Circle have brought together. You can get them on YouTube at chapaladrone, but since you won't remember that, you can go onto our website and then you can find it. Or at least I wouldn't remember it. We're going to do something a bit different today. I'd like to introduce Reverend Don and Phil, and they are going to entertain us.
Are you a reverend also? He's a reverend as well.
Irreverent.
Irreverent, yeah.
All right. These readings all have to do with the subject, which is creativity and the art of playfulness.
The first one is from Kingman Brewster. There is a correlation between the creative and the screwball, so we must suffer the screwball gladly.
You're very creative, aren't you? Personally, I would sooner have written Alice in Wonderland than the Encyclopedia Britannica that was said by Stephen Leacock. I'll do it right next.
And Mozart? When I am completely by myself, entirely alone, or during the night when I cannot sleep, it is on such occasions that my ideas flow best and most abundantly. Whence and how these come, I know not, nor can I force them.
And this one is by Alex F. Osborne. Creativity is so delicate a flower that praise tends to make it bloom, while discouragement often nips it in the bud. Any of us will put out more and better ideas if our efforts are appreciated.
The next one is from painter Edgar Degas. No art was ever less spontaneous than mine. What I do is the result of reflection and study, of inspiration, spontaneity, temperament. I know nothing.
This is by Edward Alden Jewell. To paint a fine picture is far more important than to sell it.
Paul Cézanne. With an apple, I will astonish Paris.
Paul Gauguin. I shut my eyes in order to see.
Lincoln's defense. Art is like a border of flowers along the course of civilization.
This is one of your guys, G.K. Chesterton. Art, like morality, consists in drawing the line somewhere. I wonder who he's talking about.
Pablo Picasso. Every child is an artist. The problem is how to remain an artist once the child grows up.
Arthur Schnabel. The notes I handle no better than many pianists, but the pauses between the notes, that is where the art resides.
Mies van der Rohe. Less is more.
Nietzsche. Nietzsche said, without music, life would be a mistake.
And finally, another one attributed to Nietzsche. And those who were seen dancing were thought to be insane by those who could not hear the music.
Next week's presentation, How the Virgin of Guadalupe Became One of the Most Important Religious, Cultural, and Political Symbols of Mexico, presented by Jim Cook. The Fiesta for the Virgin of Guadalupe is held yearly on December 12th. Since the Spanish conquest, this incarnation of the Virgin Mary has been a powerful symbol, particularly for Mexico's poor and indigenous. She is found everywhere, from cathedrals in her name to humble shrines beside more remote mountain trails. Jim will explain her origin as a complex mixture of paganism and Christianity. He will show how she was used during the spiritual conquest of New Spain to overcome native resistance, and then centuries later was the rallying symbol of the insurgents during the Mexican War of Independence. During his 11 years living full-time in Mexico, Jim and his wife Carol have traveled all over the country, absorbing its history and culture, extensively photographing the Fiesta of Guadalupe. In his blog, Jim and Carol's Mexico Adventure, Jim has published many of these photos and has written about the Virgin of Guadalupe's importance to Mexican culture and politics. Some of his photos have appeared in La Jave de Guadalupe, a book about the Virgin of Guadalupe by Mexican historian Arturo Rocha. So that is our time next week. That sounds like it's something we're all going to want to learn about. This week's presentation, we got a little taste of it already, Playing Around Creatively, presented by Reverend Don Beaudreault. The creation of something new is not accomplished by the intellect, but by the play, instinct, acting from inner necessity. The creative mind plays with objects it loves. Carl Jung. When he retired to beautiful Lakeside, many of us embraced the creative activities we have denied ourselves earlier. Philosophy, psychology, theology, art, the major disciplines of the human intellect and heart have extolled this need to create through playfulness. Don's piano will assist this exploration. Reverend Don served as a minister to Unitarian Universalist congregations throughout the United States and England for nearly 40 years. Before that, he was a teacher in the Philippines, Iran, and America Samoa. A professional jazz pianist, he has given concerts for numerous causes. He is an author, actor, singer, marathon runner, and global traveler. He has 2 daughters and 2 granddaughters, and he and his partner share their lives with 8 rescued animals. Please join me in welcoming Don, Reverend Don, as he starts us with our centering moment and then goes right into his full presentation. Thank you so much. I'm glad you're here.
Spend a few moments with me in meditation. And part of that will be musical meditation at the end of the spoken part and the guided part. So, relax in your chair. Just relax. And close your eyes. Start to breathe very slowly and deeply. And let go of the tension in your body. Just let it go. Slowly and deeply, one breath after another, the miracle of it all. And release all the expectations of this moment. Just let them go. All the worries. And now I want you to go back in time. Go back to when you were a child. See yourself as a child. See that image in your mind's eye. Choose any age you want as a child. And choose a particular moment. A moment when you were ecstatic. When you were absolutely happy. Really happy. Without any cares. Think about this for a moment. Think about what it was that made you happy. Was it playing? Meeting a new friend? Something nice somebody said about you? Talking to your pet? A gift somebody gave you? Learning something new? Making something? So for a few moments, feel what you felt when you were that child. Let us remain in silence, to be followed by a short piece of music. Please open your eyes and greet who you are at this moment. The two subjects today are very important ones in my life. I've been analyzed by various therapists as highly creative, somewhere in the 99 percentile, which means there are very few of you who understand me. And I have had that experience here, the 6 years we've lived in Lakeside. I'm one of the divas, as I've been told. Sometimes it's very hard to be categorized as creative, but perhaps it helps as well. Part of that process is to have teachers and parents, advisors, those who think they know best, to tell you that you're doing it wrong. I don't know how many of you, when you were a child, had the experience that I did. I was told that I was really bad at music. I was told that I should never sing. I never really sang a solo until I came to Lakeside, and now you can't get me away from karaoke or any other chance when someone offers me to sing a solo, which I'm going to do a little bit later. And I don't want you to judge me, but you will. The other thing that I was taught in 8th grade after I spent hours and hours doing my 8th grade history project, painting this beautiful portrait of Abraham Lincoln, the #1 most revered president of the United States, was that when I revealed this, thinking that I had created this masterpiece, everyone, including the teacher who tried not to, laughed at me. I never painted again until 10 years ago. And I love painting. I have written things all my life. I'm just finishing a 9th book, none of which has been published, but I've not really tried. And part of that is perhaps people have said to me, teachers, whatever, you don't know how to write. Although I have had articles published and have a master's in English literature. Has that been your experience? Yeah? Let me see. Come on, let me see some head shakes or hands. Not over here. These are perfect people over here. I'll talk to this group instead. I'll talk to the wall. Is that? That's not the wall. As a teacher for 8 years, and as a parent and as a grandparent, I have attempted to say to the kid, yeah, that's really good. You know, and if it isn't really good, not to say, that's not good, you shouldn't do that anymore. What we do to each other as the advisor, the older person, the mentor, what have you, to the kid is deplorable. Absolutely deplorable in that regard. Some parents have it together and others don't. Mine somewhat did. But that's not where I'm really going with this. I believe that creativity should be a positive experience. And that when you learn things, like I'm learning how to act. That's a new thing. Actually, on the stage is what I mean. I'm learning how to act all the time in life, but to do it on the stage, to be open to hear what mentors who know what they're doing suggest things to you, and to be positive about that. This reading is from John Robinson, and John is a retired Unitarian Universalist minister. He's one of my colleagues, and he wrote this a number of years ago. And it brings our two subjects together, the subject of creativity and the subject of playfulness. John says this, a little piece called At the Zoo. It only takes a few hours at the zoo to convince me that the last thing that God had in mind was humankind. I think that whatever God created this universe, she or he did it out of pure fun. That he or she tired after making birds black and tried a parrot or a flamingo. I think that he or she fell over in hysterics when she or he made the flaming rear ends of the baboons. That he or she delighted in the ponderous elephant and wanted something to look big and cuddly, so he or she made Kodiak bears, and wanted something sleek, so he or she created the cheetah. But when she or he came to humans, I expect it was out of a need for utter amusement. Impressed by the work of the ape, he or she thought, let's evolve something that walks upright, has a little more brain and fingers to manipulate the world with. Let them think they're a little higher than the animals. And when things get dull, looking at the parrots' colors or the antics of the baboons, they will be fun to watch. The one sin God will not forgive is being boring. The evidence of the world around us is one of beauty and novelty. I believe that God, he or she, is the evolving part of life itself, its course and its being. And to whatever degree he or she has consciousness, I'll wager God laughs. I do, said John. Perhaps John is more theistic than I am. I'm pretty much an agnostic, verging on atheism, depending upon what time of the day it is sometimes. So this morning, I'm watching my time very well here. We've got a lot of time. This morning, I would like to share my thoughts about creativity and play, two major concepts of what it means to be human, and how to bring those two together, because they don't always come together. And yet, the experts of today, who are experts on the subject of creativity, which seems to be a brand new subject to study, get online and look at this. There are incredible things coming out about creativity and how to make the world better and all this. And only some of them talk about the playfulness aspect of creativity. There are lots of definitions, of course, about creativity. Let's talk about that, and then we'll talk about play, and I'll bring them together. One of my favorite definitions about creativity comes from Rudolf Flesch. Rudolf Flesch was a fellow who wrote the book, Why Johnny Can't Read. Any of you remember that in the United States? And it influenced Dr. Seuss and the Cat in the Hat, because it became a phonetic way of reading. Correct? I'm looking at some English teachers here. But he said this: creative thinking may mean simply the realization that there's no particular virtue in doing things the way they always have been done. I have thought about that more than anything else in this sermon. Let me read it again. Creativity means there's no particular virtue in doing things the way they've always been done. Most of you are retired. It's time to change. Shake it up. Do something new. Present something at Open Circle. Take piano lessons. Become a terpsichorean. Dance. Synonyms for creativity abound: inventiveness, imagination, innovation, originality. And we can say that everyone is creative, and that would be true. But we all know that some people are more creative than others. But then there's a little caveat here, because the reality is that we use 90% of our brain is that creative aspect to it, the mystical side, the more primitive part of the brain that's developed first. And it's that 10% up in the front that has us actually put into effect our creative reality. So when we say some people are more creative than others, those are the ones that at least are showing what their creative work is. We all have that creative aspect there. We just don't use it. Or we're afraid for whatever reasons we were told as a kid, perhaps, that we weren't good to begin with. Now, there's a story about how to navigate the waters of the Pacific. So there are two different subgroups here. The story about the island of Truk, T-R-U-K, and the navigators there, compared with what I will call the gringo sailor. The Truckee sailor uses what we might call as visualization before he or she begins to undertake a voyage in a ship, in a boat. He sees his destination's position in relationship to the other islands. Once on his way, he is forever changing his directions in relationship to where he is and where he's going. He improvises. I'm a jazz pianist. I improvise. I create something new. But like the Truckee sailor, a jazz pianist, most of us know music theory. We have a discipline. The Truckee sailor has the discipline of generations who went before him, who were on those little boats, navigating without a compass, without a map. So here comes the gringo sailor. The gringo comes to Ajijic, let's say. And the gringo comes complete with all the right paraphernalia, how to navigate the streets of Ajijic. Good luck. We come with our maps. I'm one of these. We know our latitude and longitude if we're undertaking this voyage in the Pacific. We have a plan. We follow it step by step, by step, by step. We perhaps don't even look at the sun or the stars because we have our little compass. We can predict what time we will arrive. The Truckee sailor listens to his imaginings. He improvises. He is creative. The gringo sailor follows a prescribed way. He uses the rule book, and he is uncreative. Which one are you? And if you had to choose, here you are on the beach, on the island of Truk, and you had two people offering their services to you, and you wanted to go to that other island somewhere. Who do you want to steer your dinghy? Back to the thought that all of us are creative. That might be true, but some of us, as we know, it's the right brain that has that creative aspect, right? It's the right brain. That is more developed in some individuals than others. And there's something else that I've learned. A very striking reality about the brain is the fact that that not everyone can visualize. So I want you to spend just another brief moment in meditation and close your eyes again and relax again. Remember what Paul Gauguin said. We just quoted him. I shut my eyes in order to see. Close your eyes, stay quiet, breathe gently. And now, I want to give you an image. I want you to see it in your mind's eye. It's a big, red, juicy apple sitting on a bright purple tablecloth, and it's shining as the early morning sun streams through the kitchen window. Okay, open your eyes. How many of you did not see that apple? Anyone else? The two of you? Anyone? I got you. That's about the percentage. There are people who do not see. Is that true for both of you all the time? When I would describe something, reading a story, you would not see it, you would... Okay. Those two individuals can teach the rest of us who see that apple a lot about what it means to be creative. There's just recently study about people who are not able to visualize. That's a brand new study of neuroscience. I'm pointing to Phil, our resident expert. And I find that wonderful. We're all so different. We're all so creative in different ways. And that 90% of the brain where that creative part is, and the other things too, of course, we don't move it forward. We don't act upon it. We don't use our brain. On a good day, we only use our brain 10 to 15% of our brain. On a good day. That's all we're using. So how creative are we? Who among you are professional artists? Have you ever sold your work? Let me just see. Or played piano. Oh, you're an artist? Okay. Professional. How many of you would say that you're an artist, a pianist, a writer? Please raise your hand. A dancer, a wonderful cook. How many people have had 10 children? That's highly creative. How many of you do not think of yourselves as creative? Oh, come on, stand up. Let's poo-poo these people. Okay, you're the therapist. See them afterwards. We're all creative. Okay, I won't go there. I won't be negating anyone. If you want to stay that way, that's your choice. The psychoanalyst Ernst Chris believes the initial creative inspiration, where you get this, aha, I'm going to do that. I'm going to write a book about that. I'm going to paint that picture. That comes from our ability to regress to what's called primary process thought, that back part of the brain. The later elaboration of the idea, that is, if we actually put it into effect, comes from this part in the front, and it's secondary or logical thought, and we need that to carry out the inspiration. So many of us never use that front part. I'm a frustrated everything when it comes to creativity. There's so much. I would have to live many lifetimes to write all the books that I would love to write. Anyone else like that? All the paintings that you want to do? The other beautiful thing about being impassioned, having this passion for creating, I have to say, especially artists. My two significant love affairs have both been artists. And I married both of them, about to marry a second person, because of that artistic temperament. They are so involved in what they're doing. They lose themselves in that passion. I love that. I do that with the piano. I feel very fortunate to have that. But not everybody has that. So how creative are we? Some people are very creative indeed. Some of them believe that their creative output comes from beyond the intellect. And here it becomes very interesting because, again, we're dealing with the primitive brain. They believe there's a direct link to a divine source and that their works come through them but not from them, per se. There was a term I remember when I was studying literature. It's called automatic writing, where the artist or the writer felt that he or she was being inspired somehow by this, say, divine source or not divine source, but by some source. And I'm sure, and I know, as someone who paints and plays piano, I also feel that. I can't name it. It's very abstract in my head, but there are people who have named it and are very clear about this. And one of them was my favorite. I studied him. William Blake, the English romantic or pre-romantic poet, who was also quite a mystic. William Blake said this, that he wrote one poem from immediate dictation. Now, who was dictating to him? We're talking about the end of the 1700s as we move into that period. He wrote one poem from immediate dictation, 12 or sometimes 20 or 30 lines at a time, without premeditation, and even against my will, he said. Imagine him going to a writer's group in Ajijic. Listen to your own source of inspiration. Blake also saw dead people. That's another subject I want to talk sometime about. How many of you see dead people? The guy that doesn't see images, an artist. I see him too. I got to talk to him. I know you're shy about that. For Blake, the spirit world was his reality. It wasn't the world we live in. He was very close to his deceased brother. He often saw his brother, often spoke to him. And it was his source of inspiration. Both Mozart and Beethoven might not have seen dead people, but they did hear complete symphonies in their heads before they ever wrote them down. They only had to write them down. It was already there. Genius. Scientists, too, have had similar experiences. The French mathematician Henri Poincaré wrote, I love this, one evening, contrary to my custom, I drank black coffee and I could not sleep. Ideas rose in crowds. I felt them collide until pairs interlocked, making a stable combination. And by the next morning, I had established the existence of a class of Fuchsian functions. I had only to write out the results, which took but a few hours. I did look up what a Fuchsian function was. I didn't understand it, so I won't tell you what I don't understand. But Henry Moore said something, too, about the source of inspiration being of somewhat of a divine impetus. He said, now, I really make the little idea from clay, and I hold it in my hand. I can turn it. I look at it from underneath. I see it from one view. I hold it against the sky. I imagine it any size I want it to be. And I feel like I'm in control, almost like God creating something. What joy to have that sense that you have brought something forth that wasn't there before. Others are less spiritual about their source of creation. Anton Bruckner, the great composer, was once asked, Master, how, when, where did you think of the divine motif of your Ninth Symphony? And Bruckner replied, excuse the accent, I walked up the Kallenberg. When it got hot and I got hungry, I sat down by a little brook and unpacked my Swiss cheese. And just as I opened that greasy paper, that darn tune pops into my head. I love Pablo Picasso. I did a major study of him once. He never, ever stopped creating. Never. And he was such a technician. He didn't really care about whether or not there was a God. That man knew what he was doing. Classically trained, he was one of the best classical painters, but then he created a whole new style. Let's bring in the idea of play, the second concept. Let's see how it connects with creativity. We've already heard Carl Jung this morning say that the creation of something new is not accomplished by the intellect, but by the play instinct acting from inner necessity. The creative mind plays with the object it loves. This is perfect advice for all of us who, upon retirement and moving to Lakeside, decided that it was about time we played around a lot more than we do and played a lot more creatively. I was a Unitarian minister for almost 40 years, and I taught school for 8 years. I've tried to save the world. I've given up. I don't want to sit on any more committees. If there's a passion, if there's a social justice cause that I feel I can do something about, I will do that. I love discovering or rediscovering the creative and playful side of myself. And I might be in a crazy period of my life right now, but it's also one of the happiest times of my life at nearly 74 years of age. Years ago, many of us will remember this, I'm sure you do, because every therapist was quoting, and every Unitarian minister was quoting, the wise advice from Nadine Stair, which I'm only now starting to apply, and I'll only stay part of this. She said, if I had my life to live over, remember that? You do, yeah. I dare to make more mistakes next time. I'd relax, I would limber up, I would be sillier than I have been this trip, I would take fewer things seriously. I would take more chances. I would climb more mountains and swim more rivers. I would eat more ice cream and fewer beans. I've been one of those persons who never goes anywhere without a thermometer, a hot water bottle, a raincoat, and a parachute. If I had to do it over again, I would travel lighter. I'd start barefoot earlier in the spring, and I'd stay that way later in the fall. I'd go to more dances. I would ride more merry-go-rounds. I would pick more daisies. We're still alive. Go pick some flowers. About the idea of play, the Russian novelist Maxim Gorky visited Coney Island once, and he was shown this great entertainment place in the United States. And he was there for hours observing the Americans having fun. And despite the fact that he wrote about very difficult times in 19th century Russia and the horrible times that he had, he could write about that experience in Coney Island with a very important statement. All seemed well until he was leaving the park. And then his friends asked him if he really enjoyed himself. And he said, well, I observed all these people. And then he said, what a sad people you must be. And what he meant was that those people, those Americans, that day in Coney Island, were trying so very hard to have fun. They were working at playing. Some of the stuff that's coming out now about the idea of creativity, it's like reading what the U.S. Congress has written. It's like a report. Here's how to be creative. Follow these examples. That's not fun. Play is something that causes us to be more than we are. That tells us to wake up and not take ourselves so seriously. That allows us to discover the more profound sense of who we might be. Now, in describing humanity, there are three ways that many experts talk about, coming from a lot of the Greek thinking. There are three aspects to us. We're Homo sapien, the thinker. We're Homo faber, the doer. And we're Homo ludens, the player. The human being as thinker, maker, and player. Unfortunately, we don't play enough. Johann Huizinga wrote a classic book called Homo Ludens, a study of the play element in culture, brilliant book. And he defined play as a free activity standing quite consciously outside ordinary life, as being not serious, but at the same time absorbing the player intensely and utterly. It is an activity connected with no material interest, and no profit can be gained by it. It proceeds within its own proper boundaries of time and space. Remember when you were a kid and you just played? You didn't play because you were going to be paid for it later, or because you were trying to just please your parents or whatever. Creative individuals are often able to combine those three aspects, knowledge, work, and play. But so many of us never really get to the play. We work at playing. We're in Coney Island. Our society does not allow us to infuse that sense of playfulness. And therefore, we're not really as creative as we could be. The philosopher J.C.F. Schiller created the phrase, the difficult art of living. He meant that no matter how much a person desires to live up to those ideals of love, truth, duty, God, beauty, she or he is forever doomed to failure. And the answer for Schiller was to combine the dichotomies of life as play and life as seriousness. He gave the example of a child. And he said, when a 2-year-old boy is asked to wash his hands for supper, he embarks on a 10-minute adventure of splashing water and letting the soap slip through his hands, finger painting the slimy suds all over the bathroom tiles. I still do that, actually. He has no purpose in mind. He does not yet know that the point of the game is to win. He plays freely. His work is no different from his play, nor is his play different from his work. Play is the name of the unification of seriousness and non-seriousness in the child. If only we can go back there again. The followers of Socrates spoke of the unity of being human. Socrates himself believed in, quote, as he said, playing serious, and, quote, seriously playing. And then came Plato. And Plato changed things up a bit, didn't he? He divided things into twos. Play, he said, so that you may be serious. There are cultures today who let the child play until he or she is 12. And then it comes down like that. Then you're to put the suit on. Then you're to go to work. And then you are not to smile. Then you're not, on and on and on. I love the Mexican culture, I have to say. Very different. Plato and Aristotle seduced the Western world into viewing the world as a place of distinct polarization, where humanity lives out its existence between the points of good and evil, sacred and secular, God and humanity work and play. And it's done us a disservice, a total disservice. Indeed, the churches dealing with the concept of joy or play can be compared to the remark Samuel Johnson made about his dog, and his dog managing to walk on its hind legs. He said, it doesn't do it very well, but you're surprised to see it done at all. separating what's sacred, what's secular. I've asked that question all my life. To be fair, there were those few church spokespersons that desired to combine the dualistic aspects of human existence. Among the early church fathers was Clement of Alexander, who is actually a Unitarian Universalist hero, because he spoke of the Christian life as a divine children's game and life as mystical play. There's the divine sense of being. There's a phrase about that where one is living life as if you are a couple inches off the ground, that you're not really on the ground. That's the mystical side. That's the playfulness of it all. Hinduism takes play into philosophical construct much farther than Christianity. According to its teachings, that which is divine plays. And the world as we know it is the result of God's amusement, or what in Sanskrit is called lila. Therefore, we should not be deluded into believing in the seriousness of finite reality. What's real? That is merely illusion, or in Sanskrit, Maya. You know, even Martin Luther, who I particularly like, although I'm not a Lutheran, but Martin Luther could be warm and fuzzy after a few beers. And that's historic. I'm not just making that up. And he could say wonderful things like, all creatures are God's masks and mummeries. It's illusion. Taoist tradition, I think of myself as a Taoist, points to the concept as well when it says, he who possesses virtue in abundance may be compared to an infant. Alan Watts, who died far too young because of drink, he was an Episcopal clergyman and was outrageous in his comments, but I particularly loved him. He said this, "It does not seem to have occurred to most Christians that the means of grace might include trickery, that in his cure of souls, the Lord might use placebos and jokes and shocks and deceptions and all kinds of indirect and surprising methods of outwitting man's wonderfully defended egocentricity." I used to listen to Alan Watts tapes, and I can hear his voice in my head right now. So Watts suggests that we move to the effortless measure of a heavenly dance. Look at life that way, as that metaphor. Life is playfulness. It's a dance. And when you're in that playfulness, the creative thoughts will come. The creative work will occur. But it's to have a sense of joy about it all. I'd like to close with this reading. A poem by Jim Metcalfe. He was a New Orleans journalist who also wrote marvelous poetry. I never got to know him, but I did live in New Orleans a number of years. And he wrote this, and this is for all of you who are the artists in the world, which means all of us, all of you creative people. I bet you cook really well. No? Oh, okay. He said this, think about your legacy in life. To leave behind some vestige of the thoughts we had, the things we felt, some tangible evidence that proclaims us to be more than things that walked and breathed, and for a time occupied some tiny space. This is the dream eternal of those who would create, those who would leave something of themselves, something not here before their coming. A creation like no other, as no person is like another. And if it be beautiful to behold, many will be the happier for it, and if it is judged to be otherwise, so be it. If in honesty it reflects a thought, a mood, or transient fantasy of its creator, art's purpose has been served. The artist has had his say. I have lived, I have felt, and this I leave as part of both. So let me finally say to all of you, imagine that creative source within you that's still there. Perhaps yet to be discovered, but it's there. That source within you, imagine him or her as a playmate, not as a taskmaster, a co-creator, not a critic, a muse who wants you to enjoy your life, not suffer through it. Be that playful, creative child within you. He is waiting for you. And most of us here, in the grand scheme of things, we really don't have that much longer. So don't delay. Ride more merry-go-rounds. Pick more daisies. Thank you. Oh, yeah, I was going to play. I forgot. I have 2 minutes left. Okay, this is from a guy who was told he couldn't sing pretty much throughout my life. I'm going to sing anyhow. I'm dreaming tonight of a place I love, even more than I usually do. And although I know it's a long way back, I promise you I'll be home for Christmas. You can count on me. Please have snow and mistletoe and presents by the tree. Christmas Eve will find me where the love light gleams. I'm home for Christmas, if only in my dreams. You can sing along if you want to. I'll be home for Christmas. You can count on me. Please have snow and mistletoe and presents by the tree. Christmas Eve will find me where the love light gleams. I'll be home for Christmas, if only, if only, if only, if only, if only.
Thank you. Whew. Thank you, everybody, for being here. We look forward to seeing you next week. And if you would help us, if you would pick up your chairs and coffee cups, you can turn back on your cell phone if you would like to. It's an option. Doesn't have to happen. Pick up your shawls, anything you brought with you, take back with you, unless it's a really beautiful shawl, because you know I like to wear them and I would keep that one. Thank you. If you could take also your conversation outside, we'd appreciate it so we can completely break down.